Hello. Well, today I'm talking about Where Angels Walk, written by Joan Wester Anderson. Joan at that time was an author, lecturer, and a teacher who began her writing career way back in 1973. She's also a college lecturer. And let's read the flyleaf. Just when you thought you were alone, along comes Where Angels Walk, a heartwarming, spine-tingling, true account of people just like you. People who, in a time of need, found themselves in the living presence of beings who led them out of the threatening darkness and into the light of hope. Defying explanation or description in our everyday terminology, the beings they encountered can be called only angels. For years, many of these people have cherished their extraordinary experiences in the secret depths of their hearts. And then author Joan Wester Anderson encouraged them to come forward with their spiritual treasures. Now you can share their wonder and their awe, and by sharing it, transform and enhance your life. Yeah, this happened to me. I saw this book originally at about 12 noon in Oxfam Bookshop in Chippenham in Wiltshire. And we were down in Chippenham because our granddaughter Chloe was in a national championship in her athletic gymnastics. And so it was easier to see her over in Chippenham than travel all the way up to Middlesbrough. So Margaret and myself popped along to Chippenham. I read the flight covers, etc., of this book, 12 noonish, and I put it back. It was £2.50. I don't pay that much for books. Anyway, best £2.50 I ever spent. Anyway, come 4 o'clock, 5 to 4, when the shop was shutting at 4 o'clock, I was running through the town like a man possessed. Grabbed the book, paid my money, and thankfully I did, because what a wonderful read. Read the book. You can hardly put it down when you pick it up. And the book is all about stories of angelic intervention in people's lives, ordinary people. And something angelic occurred in Joan's life. And because of her experience, she put adverts in all kinds of papers and newspapers, magazines, periodicals in the USA. And was deluged with responses. And she was asking for people to give their stories of angelic intervention. And this is Joan's story. And the first chapter is called In the Beginning. A guardian angel o'er his life presiding, doubling his pleasures and his cares dividing. That's written by Samuel Rogers in Human Life. It was just past midnight on December 24, 1983. The Midwest was shivering through a record-breaking cold spell, complete with gale-force winds and frozen water pipes. And although our suburban Chicago household was filled with the snug sounds of a family at rest, I couldn't be a part of them, not until our 21-year-old son pulled into the driveway. At the moment, Tim and his two roommates were driving home for Christmas, their first trip back since they had moved east last May. Don't worry, Mum, Tim had reassured me over the phone last night. We're going to leave before dawn tomorrow and drive straight through. We'll be fine. Kids, they do insane things under normal circumstances, I figured. A Connecticut to Illinois trek ought to take about 18 hours. But the weather had turned so dangerously cold that radio reports warned against venturing outdoors, even for a few moments, and we had heard nothing from the travellers. Distressed, I pictured them on a desolate road. What if they ran into car problems or lost their way? And if they had been delayed, why hadn't Tim phoned? Restlessly, I paced and prayed in the familiar shorthand all mothers know. God send someone to help them. By now, as I later learned, the trio had stopped briefly in Fort Wayne, Indiana, to deposit Don at his family home. Common sense suggested that Tim and Jim stay the rest of the night and resume their trek in the morning. But when does common sense prevail with invincible young adults? There were only 4 driving hours left to reach home. And although it was the coldest night in Midwest history, and the highways were snowy and deserted, the 2 had started out again. They had been travelling for only a few miles on a rural access road to the Indiana Tollway, when they noticed that the car's engine seemed sluggish, lurching erratically and dying to 10 or 15 miles per hour. Tim glanced uneasily at Jim. "Do not," the radio announcer intoned. "Repeat, do not venture outside tonight, friends. There's a record wind chill at 80 below zero, which means that exposed skin will freeze in less than a minute." The car surged suddenly, then coughed and slowed again. "Tim," Jim spoke into the darkness, "we're not going to stall, are we?" "We can't," Tim answered grimly as he pumped the accelerator. "We'd die for sure." But instead of picking up speed, the engine sputtered, chugging, slowing again. About a mile later, at the top of a small incline, the car crawled to a frozen stop. Horrified, Tim and Jim looked at each other in the darkened interior. They could see across the fields in every direction, but, incredibly, theirs was the only vehicle in view. For the first time, they faced the fact that they were in enormous danger. There was no traffic, no refuge ahead, not even a farmhouse light blinking in the distance. It was as if they had landed on an alien, snow-covered planet. And the appalling, unbelievable cold. Never in Tim's life had he experienced anything so intense. They couldn't run for help. But even if shelter was only a short distance away, they couldn't survive. The temperature would kill them in a matter of minutes. "Someone will come along soon," Jim muttered, looking in every direction. "They're bound to." "I don't think so," Tim said. "You heard the radio. Everyone in the world is inside tonight, except us." "Then what are we going to do?" "I don't know." Tim tried starting the engine again, but the ignition key clicked hopelessly in the silence. Bone-chillingly cold had penetrated the car's interior, and his feet were already growing numb. "Well, God," he prayed, echoing my own distant plea. "You're the only one who can help us now." It seemed impossible to stay awake much longer. Then, as if they had already slipped into a dream, they saw headlights flashing in the car's left rear. But that was impossible, for they had seen no twin pinpricks of light in the distance. No hopeful approach. Where had the vehicle come from? Had they already died? But no, for miraculously, someone was knocking on the driver's side window. "Need to be pulled?" In disbelief, they heard the muffled shout, but it was true. Their rescuer was driving a tow truck. "Yeah, oh yes, thanks." Quickly, the 2 conferred as the driver, saying nothing more, drove around to the front of the car and attached chains. If there were no garages open at this hour, they would ask him to take them back to Don's house, where they could spend the rest of the night. Swathed almost completely in a furry parka hood and a scarf up to his eyes, the driver nodded at their request, but said nothing more. He was calm, they noted, as he climbed into his truck, seemingly unconcerned about the life-threatening circumstances in which he had found them. "Strange that he's not curious about us," Tim mused, and isn't even explaining where he came from or how he managed to approach without us seeing him. And had there been lettering on the side of the truck? Tim hadn't noticed any. He's going to give us a big pull on a night like this. I'll have to borrow some money from Don or his dad. But Tim was exhausted from the ordeal, and gradually, as he leaned against the seat, his thoughts slipped away. They passed 2 locked service stations, stopped to alert Don from a payphone, and were soon being towed back through the familiar Fort Wayne neighborhood. Hushed Christmas lights long since extinguished and families asleep, Don's still seemed the most welcoming street they had ever been on. The driver manoeuvred carefully around the cul-de-sac and pulled up in front of Don's house. Numb with cold, Tim and Jim raced to the side door where Don was waiting, then tumbled into the blessedly warm kitchen, safe at last. Don slammed the door against the icy blast. "Hey, what happened?" he began, but Tim interrupted. "The tow truck driver, Don. I have to pay him. I need to borrow..." "Wait a minute," Don frowned, looking past his friends through the window. "I don't see any tow truck out there." Tim and Jim turned around. There, parked alone at the curb, was Tim's car. There had been no sound in the crystal clear night of its release from its chains. No door slam, no chug of an engine pulling away. There had been no bill for Tim to pay, no receipt to sign, no farewell or thank you, or Merry Christmas. Stunned, Tim raced back down the driveway to the curb, but there were no taillights disappearing in the distance, no engine noise echoing through the silent streets, nothing at all to mark the tow truck's presence. Then Tim saw the tyre tracks traced in the wind-blown snowdrifts. But there was only one set of marks ringing the cul-de-sac curve, and they belonged to Tim's car. So that was Joan Wester Anderson's family experience about angelic or otherwise intervention. And they're a very Christian family, so a lot of the anecdotes and stories in this book stem from Christian sources. Maybe some of the magazines that Joan put her article in were Christian inspired. So the book is filled with stories of a variety of different kinds of angels. There's the archetypal angel that's 8 or 9 feet tall with wings, all in white. There's 60-foot tall beings that stand at the corner of churches that were being bombed in the Second World War. And there's ordinary people. A great many of the stories refer to ordinary people, people like you and me. And those people could well be spirit people. So let's take a little quick read at some of the stories. Here's an interesting one where an angel is actually photographed. Angels on guard. And Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes so he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. That's it, 2 Kings, chapter 6, verse 17. We've heard chariots of fire in a certain English hymn. Perhaps the most fascinating angelic intervention is that which occurs when other people see a figure and the protected one doesn't see anything at all. The Bible offers several examples. The one in the quotation above describes Elisha, God's prophet, seeing the angels clearly, but the servant seeing only the opposing army until his spiritual eyes are opened. You will read similar stories here. Author Betty Maltz gave me the example of her friend Bill, who didn't want his real name revealed. Bill, his wife and 2 children, were vacationing at Big Bear Lake in California, near Apple Valley. His wife was cooking on the open fire, and Bill took several photos of the family gathered around the fire. Then he read the Bible, asking God to protect them and give them a safe vacation. In a moment, however, their peaceful surroundings were shattered by 6 men on motorcycles who seemed to roar out of nowhere. One pulled a gun, demanding that the stunned family put their billfolds wallets and purses on the ground. Terrified, they did so, and Bill, in his haste, dropped his camera too. All of a sudden, as quickly as they came, the men seemed to be stricken with fright. Leaving the family's belongings on the ground, they turned, ran for their motorcycles, and sped off. Why had they gone so suddenly, leaving behind the items they intended to steal? Confused but relieved, Bill's family gave thanks to God for sparing them a terrible ordeal, then went on to enjoy the rest of their vacation. It was not until they arrived home and had their photos developed that they saw what the bikers had apparently seen that night. One of the photos clearly shows the form of a white-clad angel patiently standing watch over the family as they sat around the fire. There are quite a lot of stories like that. Here's another one. Myra worked for Teen Challenge at the time Torres did. Since it was located in a rough part of the inner city, she was concerned for the teens who had shown interest in receiving Christian counsel. It was difficult for them to visit the centre because of the streets just outside. A group from one of the local gangs repeatedly harassed them. For a short while each evening, Myra was alone at the centre, and the gang bothered her as well, banging on the door and shouting obscenities. One night, when the gang appeared, Myra suddenly felt inspired to tell them about Jesus. Knowing the danger, she first prayed for guidance. Yes, she felt sure she had heard the Lord correctly. She opened the door and walked outside. The gang moved around her and, keeping her voice steady, she spoke to them about Jesus. Instead of listening to her, however, the gang shouted threats of drowning her in the nearby river. Trying to appear calm, Myra walked back through the door of the centre and shut it. They didn't follow her. The next evening, the thugs were back, once again banging on the door and threatening her life. Still believing she should try and reach out to them, Myra breathed a prayer to Jesus. "Lord, let your angels come with me and protect me," she murmured. Then she opened the door and was about to speak when the gang members suddenly stopped their shouting, turned to look at one another, and left silently and quickly. Myra was surprised. Why had they gone? The gang did not return for several days. Then, one afternoon, to the surprise of everyone, they entered the centre in an orderly fashion. Much later, after a relationship of trust had been built with them, Luis Torres asked them what had made them drop their threats against Myra and leave so peacefully that night. One young man spoke up. "We wouldn't dare touch her after her boyfriend showed up. That dude had to be 7 feet tall." "I didn't know I had a boyfriend," said Myra. "No, I didn't know Myra had a boyfriend," replied Louis. "But at any rate, she was alone here that night." "No, we saw him," insisted another gang member. "He was right behind her. He was as big as life as his classy white suit." What's the next one? Next one is a chapter called Unseen Protectors. A shiver runs down your spine when you realize it is not your imagination. Something is watching us out there. And that was written by Sophie Burnham in a Book of Angels. There's quite a few books of angels. Got another one there, but the reading I take out of it is one of Joan Wester Anderson's. I think she might be the best. How many times are we kept from danger by an unseen guardian? Some people are fortunate enough to know. In 1960, the well-known Dr. Norman Vincent Peale preached a sermon that included a story about an Episcopal minister in a southern town who stood up to Sam, a political boss, and was able to defeat a plan of his. "I'm going to kill that minister," Sam told several of his friends after the meeting. Friends alerted the minister and offered to walk home with him past the dark wood. But the minister waved away their concerns. "The Lord will be with me," he told them, and he walked home alone in safety. Years passed, and on his deathbed, Sam sent for this minister. "Reverend, I meant to kill you that night," he said. "I was in the woods with a club." "Why didn't you?" the minister asked. "What do you mean, why didn't I?" Sam asked. "Who were those two big men with you?" "There were no big men with me," the minister protested. "Yes, there were," Sam said. "I saw them." Several writers told of similar events. Suzanne Vecchiarelli of New City, New York, was visiting a friend in the hospital and had brought her a copy of a book about angels. When the friend's roommate saw the book, she became very emotional and told the woman a story about her cousin Stacy. Stacy, then in her mid-20s, lived in a poorer section of Brooklyn, an area with many tenements. One night while Stacy was walking home from work, she saw a man ahead of her, loitering against a building. Stacy had an immediate feeling of fear. There had been some recent muggings in the neighborhood, and she sensed the man was up to no good. But she had no choice. The only way to her apartment was to pass him. "Guardian angel, protect me," Stacy murmured. "Be right beside me now and save me from harm." With an outwardly confident stride, she looked straight ahead and went by the man. She could feel him looking at her, but he did nothing. It was all Stacy could do to keep from breaking into a run, but with her heart pounding, she managed to continue walking calmly until she had reached the corner. Then she raced the rest of the distance to her apartment, ran up the stairs and breathlessly locked the door behind her. It took a while for her to calm down. For some reason, she felt she had escaped great danger. A short time later, Stacy heard police sirens and, looking out her window, saw flashing red lights. Something was going on nearby, an accident or another mugging. The following day, on her way to work, she saw a neighbor. "What was all the excitement about last night?" Stacy asked. "A rape," the woman told her grimly. "Just after 6 o'clock. Stacy's mouth dropped. The rape had occurred on the very spot where she had passed the loitering man, just before 6 o'clock. What if he was the rapist? She had gotten a good look at him. Perhaps she could help the police with a description. When she phoned, however, she discovered that the police had a suspect in custody. "Would you want to try and pick him out in a lineup?" a policeman asked her. "Your testimony could help place him at the scene." Stacy agreed. That night she identified him as the man she had passed on her way home. "Why didn't he attack me?" she asked the policeman. "After all, I was just as vulnerable as the next woman who came along." The policeman was curious too, and he agreed to describe Stacy to the suspect and ask him if he remembered her. Stacy never forgot his answer. "I remember her, but why would I have bothered her?" the rapist asked. "She was walking down the street with two big guys, one on either side of her." How about that? Something like that happened to me and a colleague. We were in Lincolnshire. We came out of the college we were at, and my colleague was driving. And it was a very long straight road outside the college. And she pulled straight out onto it, and there was a car way in the distance. And that car took umbrage at the fact that my colleague pulled out in front of him, even though he was only a speck on the horizon. But he shot past us at a phenomenal speed. And when we got nearer the end of that road, not too far away, he was parked in the middle of our carriageway and our lane, two lanes, one going up, one coming down. He was stopped, waiting for us to draw up behind him. And I had this terrible feeling of, well, exactly like Stacy described there when she passed the man. It was a dread, a terrible, terrible dread. Anyway, I said to my colleague, "Pull over. If he wants to play a game, let him play on his own." So we pulled over and we waited until he drove off, which seemed like a while, but it couldn't have been, but it did seem a while. Didn't think much of it. We parked up, did our business in the Lincoln City Centre. We were in a cafe. I opened up a newspaper, a local Lincolnshire newspaper, and the article was all about some crazy person who was causing havoc with a kind of road rage in his car. Maybe we had a guardian angel that day. Let's have another look at some of the stories. Here's another one I can relate to, actually. A tiny piece of heaven. I want to be an angel, and with the angels stand, crown upon my forehead, a harp within my hand. That's written by Urania Bailey. I want to be an angel. Most adults don't see an angel that resembles a typical rendition in art. Children, however, seem to connect with the winged and haloed version. One mother and her little daughter were walking down the street when, a few feet from a wall, the child stopped. The mother urged her on, but the child seemed rooted to the spot. Suddenly there was a great crash. The wall had fallen over. Had they gone on, they undoubtedly would have been crushed to death. Pale with fright, the woman asked her daughter why she had stopped at that precise moment. "Didn't you see the beautiful man dressed in a long white gown, Mummy?" the child asked. "He stood right in front of me, so I couldn't go on." Jesus had special things to say about children. He wanted them to be able to come to him freely, unhindered by adults, because their innocence and pure hearts were what the kingdoms of heaven was all about. Mark chapter 10, verse 14. Perhaps this is why little ones seem able to cut through the spiritual barriers that we adults so often construct and see a tiny piece of heaven. But when it happens, we adults still find it hard to believe. That was the reaction of Laura Lee Agnese of Bethpage, New York. Her then 3-year-old son Danny was by all accounts an especially nice child, caring and honest, although he loved telling and embellishing stories. He also had his share of accidents. One morning, Danny tore across the living room floor and tripped. A horrified Laura Lee watched him, almost in slow motion, hurtle headfirst towards the sharp corner of a table. She took several steps, knowing already that she was too late to break his fall. But Danny didn't hit the table at all. Instead, he seemed to stop in mid-air. Within a few seconds, he stood straight up again and ran on. Puzzled, Laura Lee replayed the scene in her mind. Yes, he had certainly been falling straight towards the table, and a 3-year-old tumbling at that speed wouldn't have enough control or agility to twist away. Nor had she noticed Danny trying to catch himself, yet he had somehow stopped falling. The episode defied the law of gravity. By the next day, Laura Lee had forgotten the incident until Danny, absorbed in play, looked up at her. "Mummy, I saw a beautiful lady with wings." "Really, Danny?" Laura Lee smiled. His stories were so imaginative. "What is the lady like?" "She's nice," Danny said matter-of-factly. "She caught me yesterday, so I didn't hit my head against the table." Laura Lee felt a chill. Did the lady say anything? She said she was going to watch over me and keep me from getting hurt. Danny went back to his toy, but Laura Lee was lost in thought. Danny was so little that my husband and I hadn't really taught him about spiritual things, she says. We had told him about God, but we hadn't mentioned angels. We didn't know much about them ourselves. He'd had no exposure to angels throughout preschool, church, or television either, at least not that she knew. Now Danny was telling me about a beautiful lady, and it seemed a perfect answer to an unexplainable event, a lady with wings. Yet Laura Lee found it hard to believe her son. Children that age had trouble separating fact from fantasy, didn't they? And yet, he had seemed so certain. When her daughter was born, Laura Lee had placed a print of a cherub over her crib. Now she went and got it. "Did your beautiful lady look like this, Danny?" she asked. Danny looked at the picture of the baby angel, then at her, his eyes puzzled. "No, Mummy, that isn't a lady." Laura Lee didn't want to mention the word angel. "But it has wings. Don't they look just a little bit alike?" Danny shook his head firmly, although he usually enjoyed telling stories. This was different. Obviously, to him, the lady had been real. Confused, Laura Lee phoned her sister-in-law, Roseanne. Not only was Roseanne, a faith-filled woman, able to reassure Laura Lee that angels were wonderful, she also knew Danny very well. Danny wouldn't lie about a thing like that, Roseanne comforted Laura Lee. "But let me try something." The next day, Roseanne brought a picture card of a guardian angel to Laura Lee's home. The angel looked female and had large wings coming out of her shoulders. "Take a look at this, Danny," Roseanne said, giving her nephew the picture. Danny's eyes instantly lit up. "The lady," he said, smiling. "Look, Mummy, that's the lady I saw. She's the friend that's going to watch over me. Can I keep this?" Danny never mentioned the beautiful lady again, and today, 4 years later, has apparently forgotten the incident. But Danny also seems to be a remarkably kind and gentle boy, particularly interested in spiritual things, and the picture of the angel is still on his mirror. That was lovely. That reminds me of when Margaret retired from solicitors' offices. The girls in the law all got together and jumped on a minibus, and we all went to Cardiff for the night. And we went to a place called Minsky's, and it's a bar where they have drag artists dancing on the counter, entertaining people. So there was an alcove, and in this alcove, one of the girls on the bus, youngster, 18-ish, slight, jumped up onto a stool next to the table in the alcove. Oh, and there's bench seats all around the alcove. Everybody's sitting around in those on that bench seats. The table was filled with drinks glasses, some empty, some still full. My pint pot was in front of me, and it was full to the brim with a fresh pint of beer. And this girl dancing right next to me on this stool fell. I stood up and I caught her by the arm, and it was all very quick. And she dangled from me holding her. I was a bit fitter and stronger then. I had her dangling by the arm. Her head should have hit that pint of beer on the rim of that glass. It should have. But that glass pot, I saw it explode before her head reached it. Imagine that. It exploded. And the odd thing about it was, there wasn't a shred of glass to be found anywhere, because her head, the girl's head, nearly hit the bottom. There was nothing of that glass left. And not only that, I wasn't at all damp from the beer inside it, and no beer on the tabletop. How do you explain that? I'm still left holding this girl. I'd seen the pot of beer explode underneath where her head was about to hit. So I don't know if that was air pressure, but even then, if it was air pressure, where did the glass go? And why wasn't I wet from beer? I quite happily pay for a new pint of beer to have witnessed something like that, and there to be such a miraculous ending to the story. Now, what a book like Joan's book does when you read it is it expands your consciousness, because it gives you ideas. It gives you the idea that there is such a thing as an angel. And after all, what does the Bible say about angels? They're messengers. So I read the book 6 months later, then I was in a spiritualist church. I was on the platform doing the demonstration and leading the service. And then in part of the demonstration, an angel walked down the center aisle. So I was blown away and I was flabbergasted. And I said to the audience, I wish you could see what I'm looking at. And what I was looking at was what I've tried to put on canvas was this. So it's an ordinary Christian church type building. It's called Trinity in Tredegar. I'm standing at the top there by the lectern. And this being just walked straight down the aisle, all white, 8 or 9 feet tall, huge wings, maybe 18-inch long feathers, huge. It was just pumping out light from everywhere. And when it got to the front, he basically said to me, I'm with this lady to the right. So the lady I've painted on the front there at the right. I mean, he basically said, I'm with her. And when she visits houses, people's homes, when there's been a problem and things that go bump in the night, I go along with her. So I said all this to the lady and she confirmed. And well, what she confirmed was when I said that she's seen angels, and she said, yes, she has. And then she, sometime later, explained, possibly afterwards, I can't remember, but she explained that she'd walked into the healing sanctuary at Arthur Findlay College in Stansted. And there was 3 chairs, 3 patients on a chair each, and 3 healers standing behind the patients. And behind the 3 healers, she said she saw 3 angels, 8 or 9 feet tall, with wings, beaming with light. But I didn't believe that I'd seen an angel. I just thought the spirit world had projected into my mind the image that this lady believed she had seen. I'm like that. I need more. And it wasn't long before I got more. And it was only a matter of a couple of weeks. And we used to have a class on a Monday night. One of Margaret's classes was definitely a Monday night. And on this particular Monday night, we finished that particular class. And so Margaret said, before we all go, you'll be introduced to a new spirit guide. And I did see one. And then suddenly, after I'd seen this new spirit guide, who was an ordinary man wearing purple, the empty chair that was in front of me suddenly was filled with what looked to be an 8 or 9 foot tall angel. From his seat to his head, he must have been 8 or 9 feet tall. He had the wings as well. He was all in black. He turned his face to me. It was awesome. I can't describe it in any other way. No light was coming out of him whatsoever. Black. Quite awesome. Thinking, maybe I have seen an angel after all. But what is the messenger who's all in black? He's the messenger of an impending crossing over. And so that was Monday night. Wednesday morning, I received a phone call when I was at work. And it was my cousin Susan up in Rotherham who phoned to tell me that my auntie Susan's mother, Olwyn, crossed over the night before. So suddenly I believed in angels. So here's some more stories. This one is in war times, winged warriors. An angel is a spiritual being created by God without a body for the service of Christendom and the Church. Martin Luther, Table Talk. The people of a small village had fervently prayed that they would avoid bloodshed and injury perpetrated by war raging in their country. But one night an army came to surround the village and capture it. The next morning the people looked out, saw the gathering soldiers, and were terrified. "We shall all be killed," they told one another in panic. But one of their number, a young man who often led evening prayers, seemed unconcerned. "We needn't be afraid," he told his friends. "After all, our army is bigger than theirs." "But we don't have an army," the villagers protested. The young man prayed, "Lord, let their eyes be opened." And suddenly the villagers saw another army. Soldiers everywhere upon the mountainside, poised for action and glowing with a heavenly light. The enemy soldiers apparently saw them too. Within minutes, they had broken up and raced for safety. From that point on, the villagers were left in peace. This exciting story is from the Bible, but it is related in the second book of Kings, and many incidents like it have occurred in our times too, especially to missionaries. Corrie ten Boom liked to recount a happening during the Jeunesse Rebellion in the Congo, when the rebels advanced on a school where 200 children of missionaries lived. They planned to kill both children and teachers, she writes. In the school, they knew of the danger and therefore went to prayer. Their only protection was a fence and a couple of soldiers, while the enemy, who came closer and closer, amounted to several hundreds. When the rebels were close by, suddenly something happened. They turned around and ran away. The same thing happened on the second and third day. One of the rebels was wounded and was brought to the missionary hospital. When the doctor was busy dressing his wounds, he asked him, "Why did you not break into the school as you planned?" "We could not do it," the soldier said. "We saw hundreds of soldiers in white uniforms, and we became scared." In Africa, Corrie explains, soldiers never wear white uniforms, so it must have been angels. What a wonderful thing that the Lord can open the eyes of the enemy so that they see angels. Do you want another one of them? Here's another one saying pretty much exactly the same thing. The Reverend John G. Patton was a missionary in New Hebrides Islands in the southwest Pacific. One night, hostile natives surrounded his headquarters, intent on burning out the Pattons and killing them. John Patton and his wife, alone and defenseless, prayed all night that God would deliver them. When daylight came, they were amazed to see the attackers leave. Eventually, the tribe's chief became a Christian, and Reverend Patton asked him what had kept the chief and his men from burning down the Pattons' house that night. The chief explained that he had seen many men standing guard, hundreds, in shining garments, with drawn swords in their hands. They seemed to circle the mission station so that the natives were afraid to attack. Only then did John Patton realize that God had sent his angels to protect them. We could go on like that. And there are many, many stories in here. You can almost open the book at any page and read something similar. Isn't that wonderful? Not the only people see angels. When you look at Arthur Finley's books, he has one book that's called The Psychic Stream, in which he says that basically it's the spirit world that is behind all religions. I mean, if you read a little of Islam, you read the same. So a lot of those stories connected with the Bible and very similar to what's in the Bible. So that's ancient Judaism and their stories of angelic beings. The same applied to Muhammad. Muhammad was a man of exceptional genius. When he died in 632, he had managed to bring nearly all the tribes of Arabia into a new united community. He had brought the Arabs a spirituality that was uniquely suited to their own traditions and which unlocked such reserves of power that within 100 years they had established their own great empire, which stretched from the Himalayas to the Pyrenees and founded a unique civilization. Yet, as Muhammad sat in prayer in the tiny cave at the summit of Mount Hira during his Ramadan retreat in 610, he could not have envisaged such phenomenal success. So what happened in the cave? Well, Muhammad knew about the God of the Christians and the God of Judaism by 610 AD. And there he is wishing. He says, "Oh God, if I knew how you wish to be worshipped, I would so worship you, but I do not know." So he knew of a God, but he didn't know how to worship. There's a name here for Muhammad, it's Z-A-Y-D. Zayd's longing for a divine revelation was fulfilled on Mount Hira in 610 on the 17th night of Ramadan, when Muhammad was torn from sleep and felt himself enveloped by a devastating divine presence. Later, he explained this ineffable experience in distinctively Arabian terms. He said that an angel had appeared to him and given him a curt command: recite. Like the Hebrew prophets, who were often reluctant to utter the word of God, Muhammad refused, protesting, "I am not a reciter." He was no Kahin, one of the ecstatic soothsayers of Arabia, who claimed to recite inspired oracles. But Muhammad said the angel simply enveloped him in an overpowering embrace, so that he felt as if all the breath was being squeezed from his body. Just as he felt that he could bear it no longer, the angel released him and again commanded him to recite. Again Muhammad refused, and again the angel embraced him, until he felt that he had reached the limits of his endurance. Finally, at the end of a third terrifying embrace, Muhammad found the first words of a new scripture pouring from his mouth. "Recite in the name of the Sustainer who has created man out of the germ cell. Recite, for thy Sustainer is the most bountiful, one who has taught man the use of the pen, taught him what he did not know." First words of the Quran, the recitation. And Muhammad had seen right across the sky, the whole sky filled with what he termed to be the angel. Muhammad came to himself in terror and revulsion, horrified to think that he might have become a mere disreputable Kahin, whom people consulted if one of their camels went missing. A Kahin was supposedly possessed by a genie, one of the sprites that were thought to haunt the landscape and who could be capricious and lead people into error. Poets also believed that they were possessed by their personal genie. Thus, Hassan ibn Thabit, a poet of Yathrib, who later became a Muslim, says that when he received his poetic vocation, his genie had appeared to him, thrown him to the ground, and forced the inspired words from his mouth. This was the only form of inspiration that was familiar to Muhammad, and the thought that he might have become Majnun, genie-possessed, filled him with such despair that he no longer wished to live. He thoroughly despised Kahins, whose oracles were usually unintelligible mumbo-jumbo, and was always very careful to distinguish the Quran from conventional Arabic poetry. Now, rushing from the cave, he resolved to fling himself from the summit to his death. But on the mountainside, he had another vision of a being which, later, he identified with the angel Gabriel. "When I was midway on the mountain, I heard a voice from heaven saying, 'O Mohammed, thou art the apostle of God, and I am Gabriel.' I raised my head towards the heaven to see who was speaking, and lo, Gabriel, in the form of a man with feet astride the horizon. I stood gazing at him, moving neither backward nor forward. Then I began to turn my face away from him, but towards whatever region of the sky I looked, I saw him as before. In Islam, Gabriel is often identified with the Holy Spirit of revelation. Well, that's just beautiful. And that comes from the book by Karen Armstrong, Dr. Karen Armstrong, Her History of God. Now, in Joan's book, you won't find details of named angels like Michael or Gabriel. There are books filled with information all about hierarchies of archangels, but this isn't one of them. And Joan's book is really down to earth, with very down to earth stories of spirit intervention, angelic intervention. And the end chapter sums it up very concisely and neatly. It's entitled Another Beginning. I will not wish thee riches nor the glow of greatness, but that wherever thou go, some weary heart shall gladden at thy smile, or shadowed life no sunshine for a while. And so thy path shall be a track of light, like angels' footsteps passing through the night. That was found on a church wall in Upwaltham in England. People in our culture are uncomfortable with the notion of angels in today's world. When we can explain something, we call it a natural occurrence. But when we cannot explain it, we shrink from labeling it supernatural. Yet how many of us, in moments when life has seemed most frightening or painful or bewildering, have heard a whisper, felt an invisible hand on our shoulder, been helped by a stranger who was just like us, and yet, somehow, not like us. At times when we have felt abandoned and alone, how many of us have been touched by a mysterious, inexplicable encounter that has given us the courage and the strength we needed to go on? Why is it necessary to explain such occurrences? Why wouldn't a loving God, intimately concerned with his children, send angels and humans to do his work? For what is it that angels do? They bring us good news. They open our eyes to moments of wonder, to lovely possibilities, to exemplary people, to the idea that God is here in our midst. They lift our hearts and give us wings. We can do that for each other. Angels minister to us. They sit silently with us as we mourn. They offer us opportunities to turn our suffering into bridges of healing and hope. They challenge us toward new understanding, fresh perspective. We can do that for each other. Angels offer practical help, as we've seen. They furnish information, provide food, buffer the storms of life. Angels lead everyone in the same direction, although not everyone travels at the same speed. But angels are willing to stand by and wait. We can do that for each other. There is one trouble with full-time angels. They are completely unpredictable, and you cannot send out for one. Lee Ballard, the man who met Pug, reminds us. That is why part-time angels are so important. Part-time angels, like you and me. Few of us may identify a celestial being during our lifetime, although I am sure each of us has been touched by them. But we can all be angels to one another. We can choose to obey the still small stirring within, the little whisper that says, go, ask, reach out, be an answer to someone's plea. You have a part to play. Have faith. We can decide to risk that he is indeed there, watching, caring, cherishing us as we love and accept love. The world will be a better place for it, and wherever they are, the angels will dance. Thank you. Well, one friend of mine has a family connection with a variety of experiences, and I know you're going to find my conversation with my friend Keith Price enlightening, illuminating, and very entertaining. So here we are. Well, hi, Keith.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Thank you for joining me. Now, I've spent the afternoon talking about this book by a woman called Joan Wester Anderson, and it's filled with incredible stories of wonderful stories of angelic and encounters with spirit people, maybe. And I understand you have got a fascinating and wonderful story to relate.
Yeah, it's quite a mystery, you know. It's astounding.
But firstly, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, Keith?
I'm 75 now. I was in the construction industry. I used to do bank jobs, through banks and things like that. I eventually became a clerk of works, and I've retired now. And you know, it's nice having a bit of work to do around the house, you know.
So what is the story you're going to tell us today then?
The year was 1992, and it was the glorious 12th. That's August the 12th, and my wife died. Just died. Just strange actually, because she was ill that night, and we had the doctor out, and he had a look at her, and you know, he couldn't find anything obviously wrong. Anyway, she had obviously we gone to sleep then after he left. I had a phone call in the middle of the night. The job I was working on, a storm had occurred, and it was a tower in Swansea, which was 200 feet high, and the windows were blown out. So I had to make an effort, get up and go. I went down to Swansea. I had a look around the job, sorted that out, and eventually I got back home about 8ish, I expect, or maybe 9. I can't remember. And I got back in bed again. I was in bed, and I went back to sleep. And suddenly I was woke up with a gasp, and she was non-responsive. I did everything. I done everything. I had to use. I just been on a course actually for saving lives with a dummy, you know, blowing air into a dummy. I didn't realise I'd be doing it straight away.
Wow.
I tried, and it was very difficult because I couldn't leave her. You know, you just don't know what to do. The kids had gone, were out. They'd gone to school, and my youngest school, and no, to work actually, to women work. And I kept her alive, I think. But I had to make a phone call because I couldn't go on like this. And it's, when do you leave her? What do you do? So I did the natural thing. I blew air into her. I ran to the phone. It wasn't a mobile then. I emergency. I said, hold on, I'm going back. Went back, blew air, pumped around. And anyway, cut a long story short, eventually ambulance came. My lips were out here.
Wow.
Absolutely. You swear I'd been in the ring with Tyson.
Good God.
Honestly. The only good thing about it, I could play the trumpet for a long time after. You know. And I don't play the trumpet. And anyway, they were very kind. They did everything for. They actually put it into the ambulance and they took her. I phoned my father and I picked him up on the way down, and we went down, and we just passing my steed, and I seen the ambulance stopped in the car in the park there.
Oh.
And I knew then, didn't I? You know, you just know. And it was hell. I had to tell my doctors, I had to do this. It was hell. You know, and think of your worst nightmare, multiply it by 1,000,000. You may just touch the sides. But that's what life is, isn't it? You know. So we came home, and we made arrangements with the undertaker, and a couple of days then, and we arranged for her to come home to the house. We had a room ready for her, because that's what we do in the valleys then, you know. We didn't have these luxury places where you could leave someone. And we put her into the front room. And we were all right, you know, we were just managing, I suppose. 2 daughters were absolutely marvelous, but still are. And it was Friday, 3 days after. I went to bed. The girls had gone to bed, and I don't know what it is, but I started waking up at 3:10. I did it for years. I'd wake up at 3:10. I used to do that trick thing. I say, "Oh, I'm awake now. I'll hang on for 20 minutes." When I look at it, it'd be 3:10. It was just unbelievable. Don't know why. Maybe someone can advise me on that. I don't know. Anyway, 3:10, I woke up, and Rian, my oldest girl, who was getting married a couple of months later, and she came in, and I said, "Come here," you know, touched her on the bed. We talked, and we talked about the wedding, and I told her what her mum wanted her to do, because we talked about it a couple of days before she died. And I told her, I said, she wants you to go into this pub that she worked in. She didn't need to work, but she did. And she enjoyed, you know, the cleaning it and things, you know. And I said, well, you know, that's what she wants you to do. She wants you to get married there, have the party there and everything. So she agreed. And I was sobbing my eyes out, and she wasn't. I'd run out of tissues now. So I got up from the bed, and on this side is a window, the bed. So I'm walking by the bedroom, and I bent down to pick up the tissues. As I bent down, I'm looking at the wall and the window, and the whole of my back is a shadow of myself on the wall, and a glare behind me. And I'm thinking, what's happening? And I didn't look at where it was coming from. I looked at Rian. I thought there was something wrong. I looked at Rian, and as I turned, she was on the bed, and she was bathed in light.
Wow.
And I said, Rian. And suddenly it just disappeared. I said, did you see that, love? She said, yes. I said, tell me what you see. She said, I seen a light appear in the corner of the room, and it folded within itself and disappeared.
Wow.
Now, I thought, oh, it must have been a car going past. the light or something. But my shadow wouldn't have been on that far, would it?
No.
It would have been on the other one. So it was coming from the wall with no window in.
Right.
So, I mean, the trouble is you just can't. We had done cuts for a while until it was light, but I can't explain. I never seen the light. I never seen it. I seen myself, and it was there was just someone had painted a silhouette on the wall,
Right.
someone going and but it's very strange because that's not only the strangest thing, because Gina died in the morning. Your favourite aunt died in the afternoon.
Of the same day?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mile apart.
Good.
And yeah, it's favourite aunt. And there's difference in age. Gina was 44. Sorry, she was 45. She's just 45. I was 44.
So did you associate the light then with your wife?
We couldn't do anything else.
Mm.
I mean, what can you? Things like this don't happen, right?
Yeah.
They just don't happen.
It's to most people, but they do happen. I know quite a few people who've seen lights like that.
But it hasn't finished then.
Oh, good.
Because on the funeral day, we didn't go to pubs them days.
No.
We had a tea in the house, and so we didn't drink even. It wasn't the thing to do then. And so anyway, we went just before the funeral, and the vicar, a lovely chap, it's the old vicar up in Cairo. He's a character, he was. I met him. I was building the house, doing something on the house, and I was there, and I could see his hand coming through the fence, the gate, pushing the gate open and stealing the sand. So I got up and I jumped up and I said, "Oh, you!" It's a vicar. So Graham was lovely. Oh, he was a character, an absolute character. And he's there, and I can't, but I had to tell someone about it. I mean, this thing is eating up inside of you.
Yeah.
So I said, there was Gina's brother there. There was sister-in-law, the nieces, everybody there, and I had to, this is just before the funeral, and I wanted to explain, and so I piped up and told them about it. I said, look, at 3:10, this light appeared and folded into itself and disappeared, basically. I didn't dramatize it.
Mm-hmm.
And Iris, and that's Gina's brother's wife, she said she lived in Glencorrog. That's about 5-6 miles away. And she said at that time, at 3:10, I awoke, me and Cliff awoke, and we seen a light in the corner of a room, and it folded within itself and disappeared.
Well,
simple as that.
So she saw the same a light, miles apart.
It is unbelievable. Miles. And then the niece and Linda is a very nice person, spiritualist, by the way.
Oh.
And she said, well, that's strange. She said that at 3:10, I seen a light in the corner of the room. It appeared, and then it folded within itself and disappeared.
Well,
now I'm in a quandary now. I feel like singing hallelujah, don't I?
yeah, other people saw it.
I mean,
not on my own.
I don't get one sign, I get three. I get three signs.
Yeah.
Now, how can you justify that? How can you work that out?
Mm.
Some people only get one, maybe in a lifetime. I just got three all in the same week. It's lovely. It was warm. It was it was warm.
How does that make you feel now then?
Knew that she was all right.
Yeah, it's 30 years ago now, isn't it? So.
Oh yeah, I was just 44.
So it stayed with you for 30 plus years.
Yeah, it was incredible.
And there's something you can never forget then, I presume.
Well, no one can forget that. No one can forget that.
So
and when you talk about something happening, that takes the wind away from it. Or everybody's saying it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So how do you feel about how did it make you feel now after 30 years?
I think I was rewarded, to say the truth. I thought
has it changed you in any way?
Maybe worse.
So you haven't become a spiritualist over
what
it.
it did, it warmed me. Knowing that I can't believe that her favourite aunt died a couple of hours after. Right? I can't believe that.
Mm.
There was a purpose. She was 80 odd, I mean.
Yeah, but not your wife.
She needed guidance, I think, and I think she wasn't at rest until she had shown Rian, my daughter.
Right.
When she'd done that, she was at rest. Then I felt that.
Yeah. So your daughter took a great deal out of it, more than yourself, then maybe.
Because we never talk about it.
Don't you? But she saw the light bulb blast, didn't she?
No, it's some things you don't have to shout and bawl about.
No.
It just happens.
Yeah.
How can you explain to someone? Someone wants to believe, they believe it. But everybody else is not interested in it. Some
people are, but you're right.
Oh, no, it's not that. But there is something about it, is that it was very warming at the time.
Yeah.
It was very warming. I had lots of things to do then. We had the doctor, and I had to go and speak to him. It's not very often when you have a doctor and then hours later she dies.
No.
That must be a hell of a thing. I had a knock on the door. Knock, knock. And it was the doctor. I said, oh, come in. I said, now he doesn't know what I'm going to say. And he's crying. Terrible. And I said, so why are you doing that? So you never killed her? I said, no. I said, you didn't want her to die? No. I said, let me tell you what I said. I said, Gina liked you a lot. She said she never wanted to be like that. I said, the best thing you can do, I said, get out there and save someone else. That's what it. That's what it's called. Because he didn't have control of it. It wasn't his fault. Things happen in life, bad things, good things, and you just got to get through it and handle it. But there was other things that happened. But I woke up and one morning Well, I kept waking up at 3:10 for about 5 years.
5 years.
Oh, bloody hell, I was fed
What's
up.
that all about then?
I was tired out. 3:10. Well, I don't know why. I've tried to find if there's any, like, it's a witching hour or something like that, you know.
Mm,
But
never heard of
it
it.
is one susceptible time, actually. I expect when people hear this, they say, "Oh, 3:10."
It might stir something in someone, because these things often do.
Yeah,
Because as soon as Uri Geller started talking about 11:11, everybody started noticing time of 11:11,
it's the same.
day and night, and then 10:10 and other times that
But
similar.
yeah, I woke up one day and the whole of life seems to realize what life's all about, which is a hell of a thing to say, you know, just all me bloke, can I? You know.
Yeah.
But I realized that it's not what you do, is what you perceive you have to do. In other words, it's you've got to look after everything. If you're a bad person, it don't make a difference to this guy pass it. But if you're a good person, you've got to take everything into account and maybe do good, you know. That's what I do. I can't remember the rest of it. It's
No.
quite good at the time.
Do you have any religious inclination nowadays?
What do I believe in?
Nothing really strongly then, is it?
I am religious, and I'm not a practicing Christian, but yeah, I pray to God. This is exactly what I dreamt about. I dreamt that if God is the destination, it doesn't matter which bus you jump on, which religion you go to it, as long as you get there. So what if it's every religion is right? The Muslim, the spiritualists, the Christians, what if they're all right? As long as you get there. And I thought, and that was one hell of a thing to think of then. But it seemed to give me a bit of comfort, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're lucky, we're very lucky. And that's what I think of, really. I think I'm a very lucky man.
Yeah.
And for me to have Gaynor for as long as I had it was quite an achievement.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way to think of it, I think.
Yeah.
Rather, and you know, be nasty and things like this. Just not with it. Not with it.
My dad had a couple of signs, as you've called them, after Mum died, and he didn't convert him to anything, though. I've got to be honest with you. He had exposure to spiritualism as long as I've been in it, which is a long time. And then Mum goes and dies. She'd been in a nursing home, and he woke up one morning. He slept in late. It was about 9 o'clock-ish. And he went, oh, he knew that Mum was in bed with him, but he didn't think anything of it. And then she woke him up and she said, come on, Keith, get up. And the cleaner was coming at 9:30 and he'd slept in. So he went, all right, love. Then he gets out of bed, and as he's getting out of bed, he's thinking, hang on, Queen's not here. She hasn't been here for well over a year and 10 months of being over the other side as well. So that was on her birthday, 25th of February, that was. But then it was another time then, soon after that, and we'd phoned him and we said, we'll take you out and we'll come up and pick you up now. We parked outside his house and we were just waiting there. He knew we were coming. He was just finished off his shaving or whatever. Anyway, he slams the door. He runs up his little drive and he jumps in the car. What's the matter, Dad? He said, oh, she bloody mother. She's shouting at me again. He jumped on the stair lift at the top of the stairs.
Mm.
And she's shouting at him then, "Come on, Keith, hurry up. They're waiting for you."
Mm.
He'd heard her voice twice, that he knew it was her saying, she said. And he felt her the first time. He thought she was in bed with her. He didn't think anything unnatural about it, just took him back to an earlier memory.
I've never heard of anybody or two people experiencing the same thing at the same time.
No, I haven't heard that one. But there's no reason why energy can't be manifested elsewhere.
My daughter,
yeah,
she's an intelligent girl, she's in charge of computers all over the country.
Yeah. Well, with your background, you're not this kind of man who makes things up, and to actually relate your story in public.
I used to tell Gaynor a few lies, Oh, I haven't done that. I mean, just
no, I wouldn't dream of doing that. Wouldn't dream of it.
No, it's something that, but to actually get a sister-in-law and then a niece to say the same time is, how can you explain that?
Yeah, it defies rational logic, doesn't it? But it
was a message, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just a message. It was on the doorstep shouting in, "Hey!" I mean, it's like, come on, get on with your life. That's what she said.
Yeah, yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
But because me and Rian, we don't speak about it. It's not. We don't say, "Oh, remember we did this and we did that." It's not mentioned.
Yeah, but it's still there in your heart, isn't it?
Well, what I don't know what it is, right? I don't know, but it's obviously a different plane of some sort.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely another dimension. Yeah.
I believe she was afraid, and she died, and Grant was close anyway, and they said, "Oh, come on, give it a hand," and that's wherever it is in charge up there, St. Paul or whatever, St. Peter, whatever, right? But it was someone who brought her along to ease it, and to give us a sign like that, it was like a million candles.
Yeah, but it didn't hurt your eyes, though.
No, I didn't see it. This is the point. I was looking at the wall. I was looking at the wall. I was looking at my shadow.
Yeah, but it didn't hurt your daughter's eyes.
Like this now. Like that, see it?
Yeah, yeah.
I was looking at that shadow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was beautiful, absolutely incredible. But then in the funeral, 3 days after, brother and sister-in-law, two of them, in Glencorrog, and then Linda in Cardiff. We're talking, it could be the other side of the world, would have still happened. Yeah, would have been, yeah. Right. Wouldn't have mattered where it was, yeah. What is this? What is this? That's what you can think of. And the truth is, it's an unknown identity, which manifests itself to give me a message. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there'd be no other reason otherwise, is it? No, that's right. And comfort, message of comfort. It's saying, go on, carry on, get on with it, because that's what I felt. I felt it strong. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Keith. That was a beautiful story to relate.